Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Okay. All right, before we get started, I want to introduce myself. My name is Steve Mellgren. I'm a solutions architect with SAS, part of the data ethics practice, and my partner in crime today is?
Hi, my name is SAS AI, also with the SAS Data Ethics Practice.
All right, let's get us on the road.
All right.
Couple things before we get started. So, like we said, we're part of the data ethics practice at SAS. It's kind of an interesting role. We're part of the R&D organization at SAS because we want to make sure that the software that we use and create is done in a responsible manner. So that's why we fall under the R&D organization. And one of the other things that we do as part of the data ethics practice is we work on data for good projects. And data for good projects, you're probably aware, those are where corporations will work with typically nonprofits and things like that, and they will, boy, that's loud. We'll work with nonprofits, it's okay, Alex. We'll work with nonprofits and try to help them answer questions with data that they haven't been able to do so before. So, with that, let's get started with the talk today. Probably about 3 or 4 years ago, we started a project so that we could detect deforestation in the Amazon forest. It started out as a data for good project where we were working with a partner who wanted to identify where the deforestation was happening in the Amazon. And we quickly realized that we wanted to train a lot of images. And I'll get to that in a second. We wanted to train a lot of images related to deforestation. So we went into it and we crowdsourced the process. So we created an application to go ahead and do that. But in order to get the crowd involved in a process to train a model, we had to explain how the model works. Basically, help people understand AI literacy. So if you can see up there, we collected image collection, so satellite images we collected, and then we had the crowd do classifications. Tell us yes or no, do you see deforestation? And it kind of looked like this. We presented people on a website, gave them the opportunity to say, anywhere on this grid, tell us where you see deforestation. And you click there and you can see little patches of brown, that's where some clear cutting was happening or something like that. So the crowd went in there, identified yes or no. And through that process, we probably classified a million square kilometers of Amazon forest. We ended up posting the results so that the people classifying the images could see what their results were doing. So the green was saying, hey, we didn't see deforestation there. The orange said, yep, we saw some there. And the fuchsia there, the pink, was saying, a year ago, we didn't see any deforestation, and then today we did. So we saw a change, we detected a change. So what we ended up doing was we took all that classification and we trained a model. The model was very accurate. And what would you say the accuracy was?
Boy, so just to back up just a hair, right? When did we do this project, Steve? Like in 2020?
2020 is when we started.
Right,
yeah.
so here, for us at SAS, we've been doing AI, for decades, right? Neural networks, even before we were allowed to call it AI. And so this was our attempt, without the help of ChatGPT, making AI a everyday household name. This was our attempt back in 2020 to just push AI out to the masses. And this actually was a great little project where, we were training this AI algorithm to be able to just automatically take in satellite images, detect deforestation or not. And then we were layering on a crowdsourcing component. And we used the crowd, citizen data scientists, to train the algorithm, right? And the crowd got within about 95% accuracy of what the experts who were training the model could do. So that was pretty good.
Right.
And hold on, let me back it up. There's actually 2 components here, right? So we want a good AI algorithm to come out of this. We actually got, but we inserted a crowdsourcing component, and that was the innovation part of it. So we got the AI model to come within 95% of what the crowd would identify. And the crowd, we got them around like 90%. close to what the experts in the field, in the Amazon, could do. So those are pretty good results for us. And we left it out there for like, what, 2 years?
Yeah, probably about 2
Yep.
years. Yeah, that's how we ended up classifying so many images. So when we started this in 2020, AI literacy was really the goal. We wanted to get crowdsourcing. We wanted people to understand what an AI model was and how you did it and how you train a model, how you classify images. By the time we finished it up and we were starting to plan our next project, we realized we needed to include a component that had to do with ethical AI, because that was starting to become more and more apparent that with AI systems, unintended consequences can spin out of control pretty quickly, so we wanted to make sure there's always guardrails in there. So with that, give that to you.
Okay, so if you came today for cute pictures of like sea turtles and cool projects in the Amazon, like we got you, we got that for you. But at the same time, we have ethical AI in the title, right? And the whole idea of trustworthy AI. I don't know, has anybody seen a session here by any company that says, hey, we want to talk to you about our not trustworthy or not ethical AI, right? I haven't yet, because this is where the rubber meets the road. I mean, nobody's going to say, everybody says they have responsible AI. So we want to kind of help you peek under the covers a little bit about what we mean when we talk about trustworthy and responsible AI, how we share this, not just within, we have, how many employees do we have, Steve?
12, 13,000.
12, 13,000 employees worldwide, right? So and we want it to be not just our small group pushing out trustworthy AI and responsible AI, but culture is the hardest part and the longest part, right? And shifting the behaviors. And so we want to share with you a little about our model and how we're doing that. So, but before we talk about how to, the real talk about how to achieve trustworthy and ethical AI, let's talk real quick about why it's important, right? And I'll get back to the fuzzy pictures of the fun pictures of sea turtles in a second, right? But we've all seen the news, and about AI, right? But the challenge is that it seems to be more negative than positive news, except for this one, right? Again, we're so thrilled that Canada is going in so strongly on AI and advancing the science in the community. But what I wish we would see more of, and what you guys all know, is just, all of the possibilities of AI in the future, right? And what this does. But here's a really interesting statistic as well, right? 65% of today's students will be employed in jobs that don't exist yet, right? Because of AI and how AI is going to shift the way that we do things. And that's a hard number for me to wrap my brain around. Some really smart people from England, some UK council came up with that statistic, the BritishCouncil.org. But we can talk more about that in the future. But here's why trustworthy AI is important. I loved what Sebastian said on the main stage earlier, where he was saying, actually, maybe it was when I talked to him after he got off the stage, but he's like, when I talk governance, nobody wants to hear me talk about governance. Nobody in my company, they just think I'm going to slow them down and they get really bored, right? So I have to come up with like really, really cool use cases. And that's kind of what we see. Governance might be a little bit boring to some people. People might roll their eyes, like I mentioned on the stage yesterday, but when we put it in the term of trustworthy AI, how do you make your use of AI, your deployment of AI, and when people see that, oh, it came from this person, I trust it, right? Because trust is your competitive differentiator as an organization and as your personal brand. But innovation is at stake. The largest PR firm in the world, Edelman PR, did a survey as part of their annual Trust Barometer survey. And so people are just more and more skeptical, right, of innovation. And has anybody ever seen this? This is the Edelman Trust Barometer. Has anybody ever seen this? It's actually a cool survey, again, this PR firm does. They've done it for the last 20 years. And it's an international survey, countries all around the world, right? And they measure 4 things. How trustworthy are business, NGOs, media, and government? You remember playing with this data before the pandemic, Steve? Oh, it's so interesting, right? Like when we played with this data before the pandemic, it was the reverse, where everybody trusted government, everybody trusted nonprofits, but business was on the left side, like on the less trustworthy side. But something shifted, in the last few years. So as of this year, right? The general mood and sentiment is, you know what? We believe businesses are competent and ethical. We trust them. NGOs are starting to slid in. They were not in there last year, right? So that's good news for those of us in business. But, and what we don't want is for everybody to be on the left side of that, right? So trust is the thing that holds the fabric of our society together, right? But here's my caution for us businesses as well. Because we're playing with this thing called AI, right, that can do things at major, incredible scales, it can also erode trust at a massive scale. And so you see it with just some of the headlines that are out there, right, in terms of what businesses are going through as it relates to AI. Okay, but don't take it from me. Take it from, this was from Tom Louie, who is the general counsel at Google DeepMinds. And here, but I agree with you, here's what he sees are the coming AI trends, right? And again, this is him talking to policymakers and the general public. So these are probably things you guys all already know. I'm sorry, do you want me to back up so you can take a picture? Sorry about that, a little eager with my trigger fingers. So, where am I going with this, right? If we all agree that trustworthy AI is important, what are some practical ways for us to get there? With less eye rolling from the people that we're trying to convince. But we need them to come along on this ride with us, right? Oh, and because we're in Canada, I really enjoy doing some research. My research on just the Canada and AI, and man, you guys are really impressive. In terms of what you're contributing to per capita, right, to the AI workforce. But here's the interesting thing. Of all the organizations that were surveyed, right, I like that second row. Here's where they thought they would see the most benefit from generative AI and AI in general in their workforce. I don't know, Steve, what do you think about these? Which one surprised you the most?
That IT's on the bottom.
The fact that IT is at the bottom, right, and that everybody's feeling like finance kind of surprised me. We don't like. In America, when we talk about benefits of AI, finance never hits the list for us. So, but this is why we need each other, right? Because you guys in your culture, hey, this is where we're going to deploy AI first. That's fantastic. Please continue to lead the way for us there. Okay, and as you know, that rise of decision making in AI, right, is increasing. So this is a really cool slide by one of our experts in the data ethics practice who he created this while he was at Accenture. But this is a slide of all the risks that an organization takes on when you start to slide and hand over decision making to a machine, right? And it's complex, right? You have a mix of regulatory, societal, and operational risks. And depending on what the problem is and what sector you're in, you're going to see a different combination of those. All right. We hear a lot about bias. This is just, we don't have time to go into all this right now, but I love this slide because bias isn't just one kind of bias. It isn't just one thing. I know it's a busy slide, but when you look at the process, I talked a little bit yesterday, and I'll talk a little more about the AI life cycle, how it's repeatable and predictable, right? When you go through all the steps of the AI life cycle, look at all the different biases that can creep in. And for me personally, the goal isn't to get rid of all bias. I don't know that we can ever do that. But hey, let's at least know what biases are there so it doesn't surprise us and we don't find out about it, from the news when we wake up in the morning. All right, so having said that, I want to tell you a little about how we at SAS, we saw AI regulation coming about four years ago. And so what we did was we got our C-level executives together and said, okay, we need AI governance and we need to do it now. We need to lead the way for our organization and to just get out ahead of this train. And so what we did, and I'll show you the framework. So this is my attempt to share some lessons learned, right? This is, these aren't just words on a web page, although they start with words on a web page. For us, our North Star is human centricity. Everything that we do with AI, every tool that we build for AI has to have humans at the center, right? But that alone, it has to get supported by sufficient transparency and of course privacy and security, right? It has to be inclusive and accountable and robust. So again, all easy things to say, but where the rubber really meets the road is when an organization has to prioritize these. All right. So, for example, I was in Europe last year, and I was talking to one minister of a government agency. They had just shown up in the news for, hey, the analytics that you're using to fight fraud, are you targeting a certain demographic inappropriately, right? So you better believe that transparency bumped up higher on that person's priority list after they saw that article in the news. So for us, here is our framework that we use at SAS. And actually, a lot of our customers are raising their hand and asking us to share our journey, share our best practices, and we do so freely, right? Because, we need to get this AI thing right. Wouldn't you agree? Especially like in healthcare, finance, we got to get it right the first time. And if one of us fails, we all fail, right? So we have four main pillars. It's easier to look at it this way, right? You have oversight, and oversight is where, our executives are there making strategy, where they're making all the decisions of, hey, here's what we will do and won't do. Here are the projects we will take and won't take. The uses of AI that we think are too risky or acceptable, right? And based on that oversight, we have a compliance group that'll go through and just set up the key performance indicators and we'll make sure we're compliant, especially with the regulation coming down. And then we have the operations. And for us as a software technology vendor, operations also includes the tools, the platforms that we build for our customers and other people to use around Trustworthy AI. And last is culture. So I'm not going to spend much time on the first three. Our goal for this presentation was really to talk about culture and how we're using some of these data for good projects that Steve's going to tell you about next. And to start to turn the boat around on culture, right? Because that's the hardest thing to shift, right? And the lengthiest thing to shift. But hopefully you understand, here's our framework, and here's some of the questions that we try to ask ourselves and every department as we get on board this AI governance train. All right? So Steve, you want
to
share a little bit?
Thank you. Yeah, so at SAS, when we're talking about changing culture, like Issa said, it's like turning a battleship around. It takes a lot of touch points. You can't just do it overnight and people buy into it. So what we did, we call this a continuum. So some people in the organization, they're going to need maybe a lower engagement. They're not building AI models. They're not doing things like that, but they need an awareness. So on the lower side of engagement, we have things like websites, right? You go out there and there's blogs and there's foundational articles, just understanding what AI is. And then you move into internal training. And this happens a lot where we have an initiative happening at corporate and they say everybody should learn this, and so they'll put out the websites, they'll put out the internal training, and then some of that training might be optional, some of it might be mandatory. We just want to get everybody on board so everybody knows. A lot of times that's where we stop. When it comes to ethical AI, trustworthy AI, we wanted to make sure that we continue that on and give people within the organization touch points where they could start to use those ethical AI muscles that they're learning, because we really want to get that ingrained with everything that we do. So Data for Good are the projects that we were talking about. That was that first one that we talked about, the deforestation and how we turn that into an interactive experience to do that. This next one we're going to talk about is identifying sea turtles in the Galapagos. So this was a fun project. Mm-hmm. This started out as we were working with an organization, Center for Galapagos Studies.
Yep.
And they have researchers down there that have tens of thousands of images of sea turtles, and a lot of them, for research purposes, they'll capture a turtle. The turtle might have a tag on it to identify who it is. They'll take pictures and measurements to make sure they know how that turtle is doing. They can track how that turtle has progressed over time.
Well, and literally you had two researchers, and what they would do is literally go around in a boat or swim around and look for sea turtles, right? And try to identify them, and manually by taking pictures of the markings on the side of their faces, and then based on those pictures saying, oh, have we seen this turtle before? And we thought, hey, you know what? There are 350,000 visitors to the Galapagos every year, and most of them have cameras as well. Can we come alongside you with some computer vision and help help supercharge this identification process for you. And so this is the app that Steve helped build.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. And so one of the things we did, we have all these images. Now, I'm going to teach a word that maybe most of you don't know. The little splotches on the turtle's head are called scoots. And think of those as identifying imprints or markings on a turtle, like a fingerprint. So that's going to be unique, and that's how you can identify a turtle through their scoots. Now, the left side and the right side are different, so they're going to be unique as well, like a left thumbprint and a right thumbprint. And so we have all these images. We needed to train the model to be able to go in and crop just the head of the turtle and just the profile. So we had to sort out all the left profiles, all the right profiles. And then what would happen, because a lot of these images were captured by researchers, taken by researchers, there might be a researcher in the background. So what we wanted to make sure was that we blurred anybody's face out if they were caught up in the background of these turtle images. Because going back to what Issa was saying, if we rolled this out to tourists uploading their own photos and try to identify turtles that way, we want to make sure that there's privacy for people involved. We're only looking at turtles and not looking at people as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the light bulb kind of went off for us. We've been doing data for good projects for years, and usually we just come up with an algorithm for identifying sea turtles based on pictures, and then wash our hands and be done, right? But in this case, with the need for AI ethics, and you can try it yourself too, feel free, with the need for AI ethics, before we even, our volunteer team of employees even started the algorithm for computer vision and identifying turtles, we said, hey, first write me an algorithm that strips out all the PII, right? No faces of researchers, no kids in swimsuits, strip it all out. And this is a great exercise for our employees to start flexing these data ethics muscles, right? That we've not traditionally flexed.
Yep. So if you happen to open this up, basically the one on the top is you're trying to match to, and the bottom, every time you say, is this a match, yes or no, it'll go to the next one, and then there'll be another, you decide, is it a match, yes or no. So it's just an identification exercise when it comes to the turtles, but it was a really popular, really successful project, and like we said, we're going to try to take it on and broaden it to beyond just the researchers. And going back to the principles that Issa talked about before, privacy. We want to make sure we're human-centric, and we're making sure that there's privacy involved with the AI that we're building by blurring the faces and the identities. Okay, so now we talked about the continuum. We start off with some training, some websites, data for good. We're starting to, we're in a project. Oh, don't forget to blur out those faces. Don't forget to do this. Now, internally, we also started a new program within the last 12 months at SAS, and we call it the AI Ethics Circle Ambassadors. I'm going to call it ECA for the rest of the day because I always trip over all those words. But basically, it's a way that people want to learn even more about AI ethics, how to apply it in their jobs. And so what we do is there's some internal training, there's work groups, there's sessions and things like that. And then what we want to do is we want to embed them into these projects as advisors. So I'll let Issa.
Yeah, no, I love our Data for Good projects because, for some employees, that's all they want to do, right? Is like, hey, these are, I've got some optimization skills, I've got some analytic skills that I want to lend to sea turtles or, cheetahs or whatever important social problem our Data for Good partners want to solve. And that's where we kind of sneakily, we're not sneaky about it, but that's a fun place for them to practice some of these, flex some of these data ethics muscles. But then you also have some people who get really passionate about, I want to go deeper. Like AI ethics, really important to me. And so those are the people you want to embrace first, right? And so that's what our Ethics Circle Ambassadors project was. And that's where you kind of come in and you get trained. You kind of become a black belt, right? In terms of, hey, here are the considerations from a regulatory standpoint. Here are the really good questions to ask. If you only take away one thing from today, like to start flexing that kind of trustworthy AI muscle, right? For every project you do, just ask the simple question of, okay, this is great, but for whom does this not work for? Who gets left out by this, right? Because again, that's something we have to be real intentional about asking, but when you start asking those types of questions, then you start bringing other people along.
Well, and Isa, I'd also add one more thing, and that would be if just because we have data doesn't mean that we should use the data, or just because we have data in this format, we should use it in that format, because there could be privacy considerations, all these things. That's part of it, is questioning the data and the usage. We might be able to use certain data, but maybe we have to aggregate it first so that we can't identify anybody or things like that.
Right, so just not only can we do it, but should we do it, right? Which you've heard a lot. So this is just an example of the process we take our AI ethics circle ambassadors through. Looking for questions to look for when questions to ask when looking for transparency and human centricity, and just be a good sounding board, right? We're trying to not be the police, because nobody likes to be policed, but to be the ones that come alongside the AI practitioners and say, hey, have you given thought to this? Hey, have you given thought to that? Oh, we've got some resources here that might be helpful to you, So here's some examples of how we've injected some of these ethics circle ambassadors into our Data for Good program and projects.
Yep. Okay, so the first project we did the Amazon, then we did Galapagos, kind of getting closer and closer. We finally got one in Canada here. And this one was in partnership with NOSM, which is Northern Ontario School of Medicine. They were working on a project to be able to map out wildfires. So there was, not too long ago, there was wildfires in northern Canada that were drifting down and blanketing a large part of the eastern part of Canada and the US.
Now you might be wondering what a medical school is doing, mapping wildfires and playing with, like Internet of Things, high-end sensors that you mount on the bottom of planes, right? And when they explain it, it actually makes a lot of sense. As we saw last summer, these wildfires cause a lot of health issues, right? If they can better predict, and they've been doing this for a couple of years, if they can better predict where wildfires are going to happen, they can better predict the kind of health care and needs that they need to prepare for. All right, and then when people get evacuated, right, that creates a whole nother healthcare. Usually when people are on the move, that's a healthcare crisis that accompanies it.
Right, and the interesting thing, so this looks like one image, and this was done with sensors on an airplane, but it's not just taking an image from above and that's it. What they have to do is they have to fly over the fire, and then they come back in another pass, and then they go back, and they do like however many passes to cover the whole width of the fire. And then they have to land the plane, and then they have to process that and stitch it together to get a single image, right? And then, once they get the single image, they would have to have somebody with specialized skills to go out there and draw the border, that in this case, that green line, that is saying, this is where the edge of the perimeter of the fire is. Where do we send our resources to fight this fire? So that would be on a shapefile with GIS coordinates, and they send it off in some format that's usable by first responders on the ground. But all that process takes time. So what the project that we were working on was to go ahead and automate the process. Instead of having somebody manually draw the outline of that fire, we automated the process and took it down from, say, 30 minutes to 60 minutes to draw the edge of that with specialized skills, down to, a minute or something like that.
Actually, it was like 30 seconds.
Yeah, to 30 seconds. So,
and that's significant, because they tell us, the fire responders tell us, that if that data is more than 2 hours old, they can't use it, right? By then, the fire's moved on.
Right. Yep, exactly. So once we did that, so another state, and what was the next phase that we were possibly working on?
Yeah, so based on the success of this project and just the improvements that they saw, the Northern Ontario School of Medicine shared it with some of the authorities, and so I think they're going to fund a pilot for the next phase to, I mean, we learned so much about forest fires, and how fires move. We've also got another fire project down in the Amazon that's continuing from our work there, but in the wildfire space, you have lots of people who are using AI and have great point solutions. So one partner might have, wearables that first responders can wear, so you can track and know exactly where your first responders are, and kind of coordinate and guide them, so you don't lose them, right? In these huge blazes. And another partner might have another piece of the puzzle, but there's nobody in the middle stitching it together, right? And trying to help coordinate and provide insights to everybody, and so that's kind of the hole that we're trying to fill.
Yeah, and that's kind of where this comes in. So once we're able to get the edge of the fire, then we can layer on all the other IoT sensors. All the assets on the ground, whether that's people or equipment or things like that, layer it on there. In this case, this happens to be in a SAS visualization tool, SAS Visual Analytics. You can layer on the background map of the fire or just satellite images, or it can be sent off in a format that maybe a first responder is used to using, like Google Earth or something like that. So it becomes a very open source type of data that we can send off to the first responders to go ahead and use that. So where does the ECA fit into this? So like we said, we have these people working on projects. In this case, we're trying to figure out how to draw that border as quickly as possible. And we brought in an ECA member, the Ethics Circle Ambassador person, who had property insurance background. So if you remember, the Data for Good people are sort of working on the project. They're doing the data management, they're doing the analytics, they're doing the visualization. And then the ECA sits above that kind of as an advisor to ask those ethical questions as you go through it. And so this person with the property experience, as part of this project, was injecting questions that we hadn't necessarily thought of, which was, should we use this type of data? Can we bring this other data in? Should we pull this data out and move it somewhere else? Just those kind of questions.
Right, he looked at it from the ethics perspective, which we appreciated, but then from the data ethics perspective, but then with his insurance background, he started thinking ahead to say, wow, how can insurance companies use this kind of data? And at which point is it not ethical, right, for them to start adjusting your insurance rates based on how they know and how they predict fire is going to move and impact people, right? And that's on the property side, but you can imagine health insurance as well. Like, there's some really tough questions to be answered there. And so I'm just thankful that we've got somebody who can start asking those questions internally so we can think ahead. So we have good answers, when our customers start to ask us for that capability.
And one of the things that reminds me of is when we're talking about bringing in an ethics circle ambassador, somebody to look at it just from the ethical perspective and not work on the project, is we want a different point of view. That's always going to be beneficial. And really what we're talking about is diversity. The more diverse you have in your group, the better off your AI is going to be. I think that's across the board.
And it sounds easy to say, but that is a really hard thing to do. It takes a lot of intentionality, but the more diversity you bring in, that was a tip directly from our chief legal counsel, who sits in our AI oversight committee, right? And she has been very intentional about making sure that every AI project, every group has that diverse viewpoint.
Yeah, and so if you go back to the principles that ESID showed a while back, human centricity being the North Star, but also inclusivity, which is represented by diversity when I'm looking at that project right there. Okay, so this one last project that I wanted to talk about was nursing homes or retirement facilities. Now this is a specific example in the US. In the United States, there's roughly 15,000 nursing homes in the US. And I didn't know this until I started this project, but nursing homes are the second highest regulated industry next to nuclear energy. Didn't know that was a thing. But if you think about it, what are you trying to do? You're trying to protect a vulnerable population, people that are in nursing homes, and so it's a very highly regulated industry. So what you're looking at here is an inspection report. This is all public information that Medicare in the United States publishes. It has to be within 15 months, these inspections have to occur at every nursing home facility that's regulated by in the United States. So in this example, you've got a write-up on the right-hand side describing what is the deficiency that they found at the nursing home. And on the left-hand side, it'll have a couple different codes, like how much of the nursing home does it impact? Is it just a single individual? Is it a smaller group, or is it widespread throughout the entire nursing home? And then it's also, what is the type of deficiency? In what area? Is it in facilities, or is it in infection control, or something like that? So there could be this big write-up on the right, and then you have on the left, there might be a score that says 2A, and maybe that means for infection control. So for infection control, you got a score of a 2, and it impacts everybody in the nursing home, for instance. There could be another one that somebody writes up something else over here on the right, a lot of detail explaining what the deficiency was. They end up with a score of that 2A, the same identical score. But what we're finding is one could be a deficiency in infection control, which is a bureaucratic problem. There wasn't a signature on the page. They didn't follow the procedure properly, something like that. Another one could be that same code, and it comes back and it says, oh, you were reusing needles when you were giving flu shots. One is, in my mind, more severe than the other. It's handling different things.
Yeah, so now this is a project that has some more clear ethical issues to be concerned with. So how many ethical circle ambassadors do we stick on this project?
We have 2 on this project.
2.
Yeah, and we have one that has a sociology background, and the other one I believe has a medical background, but I'm not positive on that one off the top of my head.
Right, and what technology did we use to
do
the text summaries?
So for this one, what we're using is visual text analytics, so NLP, to basically look at all of the information that was typed into those summaries. We're going to do some information extraction, we're going to do some pattern discovery, and we're going to try to extract out what's common in these things. Because what we're going to end up finding is we're going to find inconsistencies where maybe it was written up this way for facility A, very similar to facility B, but they got different scores. Or maybe they got the same score, but they were written up, the same, or differently. And so we're going to go in there and be able to apply some analytics to that. And Isa gave a speech yesterday.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is an example. So some of you might be sitting there thinking, well, what about Gen AI? Can we use some large language models, to fix this problem? And this is one example where you're going to want to just go with good old-fashioned text analytics, natural language processing, right? Because you're just working with documents, and there aren't that many of them. And it's not that hard, right? And so when you think about it, one, it's going to be a lower cost profile. You're not using this LLM that needs to run on a big server farm, so not only is it more expensive, that's a really expensive way to solve the problem versus, you can have just natural language text analytics software on a one PC that, has much lower cost profile and like much lower carbon footprint, right? For those of you that care about that stuff. So, and that's the one pro tip, if you would, like what we're seeing a lot right now, and so this is where we have to be the voice of reason, is almost every company's out there with this big LLM hammer, right? And they're trying to whack every problem with, because they're worried that, man, if you're doing something with generative AI, we're not going to be seen as innovative. And so while we want to be innovative, we want to also keep costs down and be good stewards of our corporate resources, right? And this is where we, as the practitioners, get to come in and help them weigh the risks and the rewards of all these things.
Right. Okay, so as we continue, remember, we're going back to culture. We're trying to change culture within the organization. And it's a slow ship we're trying to turn around and try to get everybody on board. So lower engagement, we've talked about the Data for Good projects. We've talked about the AI ethics circle ambassadors that are embedded in those projects. And then we have this concept of swarms over here. And this is where if we find something that needs to be added or enhanced in our software, let's say you want to be able to do more explainability in your AI models, and you want to add or augment a feature that we already have, we'd pull a swarm together to do all these resources. The swarms are the one area that you have to be in R&D to be, in our case, to be part of it, because you're going to be doing some coding, you're going to be working with software, you're going to be enhancing the software. So swarms, I'll give you that.
So here's what we're finding, right? And so call it whatever you want in your organization, but if you see, this is for us, when we see a need where we need some good technical help in there, we're allowing some of our developers who normally work on other products and projects, like any of our fraud solutions or customer intelligence solutions, we allow those developers to raise their hand and say, hey, I want for 4 months to hop on this swarm team and develop this trustworthy AI capability that we as an organization need, and to solve this problem for us, or to put that functionality into our products, right? So, and just to give you an idea, I wanted to just, as part of the framework, here's a peek into all the capabilities that, as we look at the trustworthy AI market, and everything that you need to do to deliver trustworthy AI into the marketplace. And again, I prefer I prefer boxes and columns, right? As opposed to the circular view. So again, these are all of the capabilities that you need to deploy Trustworthy AI. We're not saying that we at SAS do all this. In fact, there's nobody that provides and does all of this yet, right? And so don't believe them. Don't trust them if they try to tell you that they do. But this is the roadmap that we're working towards. And we try to update this every couple of months or so because of how fast the AI landscape is changing. So for example, when we think about AI developers and AI programs, right, data is the fuel that makes everything go. Well, in the data management space, wouldn't it be great? A lot of our projects start this way. Wouldn't it be great if we're using a piece of data, and can we mark that piece of data as whether it has private information, sensitive information, or maybe it just needs further review, and have that designation go with that piece of data everywhere that piece of data is used, right? So that if you as an executive get handed a report and it says, hey, okay, great insights, oh, but wow, there's some sensitive data in here, there's some private data in here, I can't hand this to an external audience, right? Like little things like that. Or if we go down to the detection area, this is one of my favorites, right? Fairness and bias assessments, automated fairness and bias assessments, right? So when I talk to a modeling team, a model risk team at this huge financial institution, and the leader said, yep, my job is to make sure I build good models and test for efficiency and efficacy. That's wonderful. And when I asked, well, what are you guys currently doing any fairness and bias assessments? He kind of got quiet for a second. He's like, no, we haven't, and we don't have time for that, right? So this is where, as AI governance folks and practitioners, we can come alongside them and say, hey, no problem. We could either help automate that for you so that when you create this wonderful model that you're ready to deploy, we can, these fairness and bias assessments can come through and say, hey, this model works so well for these demographics and these geographies, but not so well for this demographic and this geography. You might want to know that before you roll that out, right? So these are some of the capabilities, again, we're trying to build and put into actually all of our customers get these new functionalities for free. And our employees who join the swarms have an active hand in building these trustworthy AI capabilities for like 4 months. Their job is secured, and then when they're done with that project, boom, then they get to go back into their day job. And they get to take all of these skills, right, these ethical skills and new muscles that they developed back with them into their role. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, here's my favorite functionality that one of our swarms has developed. It's something called the model card, okay? A model card is like a nutrition label for your food, right? So here's an example of a nutritional label, right? You don't have to be a nutritionist to read this, right? So it should be intended for the general audience, whether you're technical or non-technical, and just at a glance, you can see nutrition information for the food that you eat. Same with AI models. We're bringing that concept to every AI model that's in an organization, where you can go in, technical or non-technical, and look at the health of the model. Look at the intent of the model. Is it starting to drift and not be as accurate, right? Because we all know that a model that was deployed before the pandemic on how people spend their money was going to look very different during the pandemic and after the pandemic, right? So models have a life cycle of their own. And so these model cards allow people, it's actually a very elegant way just to be able to know, hey, how's my AI doing? How's my AI model doing? How are all my AI models doing? Which ones are at risk? Which ones are not? And be able to move on from there. All right? So I think we're running close to time. We'll open up for questions. I don't know if we have a mic in the back that we can run to people if anybody has questions. Yeah, we have a question right up here. And how are we doing on time? Can we do a time check?
Hello?
Sorry,
Hello?
you want to just...
Hello? Okay.
I think we're okay on time.
It's coming to you.
Whose question?
Right here.
Just stand up. Hi, Misha. Thank you again for the presentation. It was very informative. So this is back about like the sea turtles. So you were saying that if people could submit their own images of the sea turtles, even if there are people in it, and you said that you would blur the people. My question was, would the blurring of people create a bias in the model by any chance? Or have you figured out a way to segment the turtles so that's the only thing that the model is analyzing? That's
Yeah, great question. I think what the team did was and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they just cropped in. So, because all we care about are the markings on the side of the sea turtle's face, right? So they cropped in down the image, automated that, deleted everything else, so that there's no issues there. I'm not sure if that did anything to the bias of the model. Do you know, Steve?
Not off the top of my head. That's a great question. I don't have the answer to that.
Right.
But to your point, I mean, there could have been like a partial in that crop photo as well.
Yeah. I'm going to go back and ask them that, right? But again, these are new muscles that we're trying to flex, right? The team that had volunteered, they were there for the sea turtles. So when we asked them to take a little extra time and do some of this PII, this privacy algorithm, right? They came up with something, but I don't know that they considered like how the blurring might mess with the bias, right? So I'll have to ask them about that. Thank you for leveling us up there. Any other questions? In the back corner there, can we run a mic over there?
Hello. I am a data scientist and AI instructor at a AI consulting company, Sparkcraft. So a question that I'm very interested to ask is that from all of this generative AI pipelines that your company are building for nonprofits, do you see any of them do you see what would be the directions or mechanism to the directions that can help you to turn a pipeline as a service to be a data as a service offering?
Sorry, so having a hard time hearing. So clarify your question again.
Yes. I see you are talking about a lot of AI pipelines and generative AI pipelines that you are building, and I'm curious to see if you are seeing your company to ever turn some of this from a pipeline as a service to be a data as a service for these clients, and do you see this as a trend in the industry?
So wow, good question. So the question around data as a service, for us, we're a analytic tools company. We've never been in the data as a service business. Like, we just don't sell data, particularly for our data for good projects.
Well, and I would add sometimes for our data for good partners, we're only allowed to use their data for that project. It's their data and we're working on it on their behalf. So some of those, I don't think we have an intention to do data as a service coming out of those projects.
Yeah. So we have some analytics as a service. Actually, we're starting to build just models for organizations, right? And that's a new group that's in our R&D organization. Although, do we have results as a service, which might be more what the gentleman is talking about,
Yeah,
right?
I'm thinking more as results as a service. As an extension to analytics as a service.
Yeah. Okay, we do have a couple of. Thank you for clarifying. We do have a couple of areas where we do offer results as a service, right? Like, hey, you know what? You don't have the programmers right now or the expertise there. No problem. Just we'll create the model for you. We'll host it in the cloud, and then we'll send you the results on a nightly basis, right? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, and I would like to see is that if you see that as a trend or in the project area that you are working with, is that a trend of companies?
Yeah, I think so. I think that is a trend, right? Because especially with the data for good projects that we work on, nonprofits, very few of them can afford to hire a full-time data scientist, right? And so a lot of times we'll come alongside them with a team of free analytic volunteers from SAS. We'll develop an algorithm for them, and then sometimes they say, "Wow, these insights are really good. Can I get them every day?" And it's like, well, you know what? We can talk about that. So and I do see that as more of a trend.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Any other questions, concerns? Right here.
Hi, I'm Pat from Vancouver Coastal Health. We're just starting this journey, so I'm curious. In your workings, what makes a good ethics circle ambassador? What are the traits?
What are the traits of a good
You know,
ethics circle?
probably it's not a skill. I mean, I like the word trait. I mean, a natural curiosity to ask the questions, to look, to explore, and a true interest in seeking out potential biases and things like that, and try to make the models as best as they can. So I think that back to your curiosity is probably the best trait.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Curiosity, compassion, right? You
Yeah.
know, just trying to be thoughtful of oftentimes, you know, underserved or people that, you know, populations that can get overlooked, right?
And so would you say they actually, would you say they actually come and go with the project? So one project would be very different from the next you actually wouldn't employ? Because I work in healthcare, the whole idea is then do you recruit a doctor?
Sorry, can you speak up just a little bit?
Because I work in healthcare, do you then recruit a doctor to actually help out during the life cycle? For example, the long-term care, would it be one physician, or are you looking, when you're talking about the traits, is the area of the project that you're focused on?
Did you
I-
hear, or you?
We're competing a little bit with the sound. Can you speak
Okay.
up just sorry?
I'm just wondering, when you're talking about the traits, is it for the project or for multiple projects? For example, if you're looking at the long-term care one, is it a physician you're looking for, or you're just looking for that specific project? I'm actually aiming for these people. Like, I'm just trying to find a way to actually
Gotcha.
bring the groups together, because it's so difficult to get people who are energized about
It
this
is
at times.
difficult, right? But they exist, right?
They
and you
exist.
and you have to find what switches them on. So for us, when we do a Data for Good project, somebody might say, you know what, I don't really care about forest fires, but I'll do turtles and animals all day long. It's like, okay, well, let's talk about that. And we use their love, whatever their passion is, we use that as a reason to say, okay, well, if you want to really be helpful on this situation, we need you to, you know, we'll teach you how to develop the skill, that trait, you know, the right questions to ask so that we can do a really good job for this thing that you're so passionate about. Right, so it's not necessarily, we're not looking for doctors. Like these aren't, you know, we don't come in and say, oh, here are the business skills. For our ECA program, it's really, hey, who has that desire to know, to develop these skills?
And it was interesting, when we rolled this out, we got ourselves in a problem we didn't think we would have, which was we had too many people apply for it. So we thought we were going to do, I don't know what the original number was, but we had to have a wait list and we had to have a second cohort. And so we ended up with more people that expressed interest in it, which was great.
Okay. No, that's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I would say too, like anything else, right? Marketing is important. So if we had come out and said, hey, who would like to be a governance ambassador? You know, we probably wouldn't have had the same response. But you know, as we talk about, hey, AI ethics, right? It's hot right now. Everybody's just really focused on it. You know, and we're going to do some good for some sea turtles or Canadian forest fires. All of a sudden now we start firing on some things that, you know, people are excited about. Okay, great questions. Thank you.
Oh, we can't hear you.
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for this. Just a small question. A lot of talk about transparency and trustworthiness and everything, ethics. Do you have examples where you missed something and the model were biased or not trustworthy?
Sorry, repeat that last part. Do we have an examples of where we missed something and
the model weren't trustworthy or they were biased? And what did you do in that case when you realized that you missed something in the ethics department, I guess?
So do we have examples where the model ended up, you know, where we missed something and the model ended up being biased, right? Do you wanna...
Yeah, well, when we do AI models and we run it through the pipeline and we get the results, we also have fairness and bias detection within there, so we can run the model and then we can find out if that model has bias. So to your point, I would say yes, that we're going to detect some bias coming through, maybe the first time through, and you're going to find out where the bias is. Oh, it's slanted bias more towards males or females or something like that. And then you have to go back and figure out how to adjust that. Do you have to adjust it with the data, or do you have to adjust it with the model, or things like that? So It's having the tools to identify that there is a bias, and then going ahead and figure out in what part of the AI life cycle did that occur.
You know, and to the other part of your question, I'm sure there were examples where we've done projects and we missed some bias or we missed something, right? So I'll give you an example. I was talking to the United Nations. You know, Steve and I have been doing projects with the UN for like, what, 15 years now? So I love working with this guy. But I was talking to the World Food Program, and they said, hey, here's our idea. We want to create an app that'll take a picture of a plate of food that a young, adolescent, almost childbearing female in a third world country is about to eat, and have that app tell us what the nutritional value is on that plate, right? Because with that information, we might be able to also suggest some maybe healthier options that'll be important as that female steps into childbearing age, to avoid some of these health issues in the country. And I was so excited, and I thought, man, that's a great project. Who wouldn't want to help with, maternal health and nutrition and use computer vision to estimate, nutrition on a plate of food? I was so excited. I go back, I share it with our data ethics practice, and one of our ethicists raised their hands, and they're like, whose standards are we measuring healthy by? And at which point do we start to nudge some of these young ladies towards the eating disorder? And it was like somebody slapped me across the face and took all of the air out of my sail, right? I was like, wait, I was just trying to do some good in the world. But like, she thought 2 steps ahead of me, right? And so it's stuff like that. Those are muscles that I had not learned and developed yet, that the ethicist thought about. And when I went back to the United Nations and said, hey, you know what? My ethicist wants to join our next phone call, because here's how they responded to our project idea. The UN said, wow, SAS, I am really impressed that you have somebody that's looking that far ahead for us, because we hadn't thought about that either. Thank you very much, right? So I'm sure we've missed some, but in our data for good projects to date, we usually go to them and say, hey, what questions do you want us to answer? And they give us the data, and then we apply the people and we answer the questions. So I'm sure there's bias that they've missed too, but they haven't complained about it yet. So that was a long answer to your question. But you guys, thank you so much. You have been such a great audience, and we'll be around if you have any more questions, but we got to make room for the next audience, the next presentation.
Thank you.